Uh, while the truce tango continues, there are questions that are being asked about how does this add up with a symbolic Iranian strike on Qatari base, followed by a ceasefire announcement that happened almost in a matter of hours. Let's put out those big questions that we'll get our experts to answer for us, and questions that are being now asked around the world. First and foremost, now as the ceasefire now comes into effect, it's expected to till about 7 p.m. Israeli time is when it is being given, that time period with window by Israel. Will this now mean that talks will once again start? Will diplomacy be given a shot? That's the first key question that we are asking. Next, will this ceasefire actually hold? Will peace hold in this region? Right now, Israel has said that they're going to see till 7 p.m. today. And remember, even during the ceasefire window that Iran was given that 12 hours, there were these massive strikes that came in from the Iranian side. Next, what really happens to the Iranian nuclear program? The premise of these strikes was the Iranian nuclear program. What happens to that, and what is the status there? And last and equally important, which is that is Trump really a peacemaker, or is he a peace prize chaser? Remember, there's been a lot of anticipation about how Donald Trump deserves Nobel Prizes because he's going around shutting and closing wars, and he's bringing about peace. And we told you about the timeline here. Just hours after that symbolic attack on the American airbase in Qatar was this announcement of a ceasefire. Let's connect the dots. Let's kind of get our guest to join us for more on this. James Dorsey, who's a journalist and a Middle East expert, joins us on the broadcast, along with Professor Jangid, who is also an adjunct faculty at the Ben-Gurion University in Israel, and also here at the OP Jindal University. All right, James Dorsey, let me start with you. How do you see things right now in terms of the situation on ground? There is fluidity, but the questions that we are asking, let's take them one by one. Do you see the fire actually holding out?
I think this is a very, very fragile halt to the hostilities. I think one's got to be careful to call it a ceasefire. Let's keep in mind that Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu call it a ceasefire. The Iranians don't. As far as the Iranians are concerned, they are holding to the position that they had from the beginning of this round of hostilities, which was, we will stop when the Israelis stop. If the Israelis stop and call it a ceasefire, that's fine with them. But as far as they're concerned, there's no ceasefire as such. There's a halt to the hostilities. Second of all, we don't know if there are any conditions or terms attributed to the ceasefire. Whether it will hold will very much depend on a number of factors. First of all, whether or not you get a return to the negotiations. Return to the negotiations is going to be difficult because the Iranians are not going to return to the negotiations on Trump's terms, which are basically a surrender. Moreover, it depends on what the Iranians do. I think one can assume
what Iranians will do. I'll tell you what, Mr. Dorsey, you're speaking about what Iranians will do. There is breaking news coming in, and let's put that out right now for our viewers. So that there is breaking news coming in, that there are more missile strikes that are taking place. That's what Iranians are doing. We were talking about whether or not this fragile peace framework may actually hold. And you mentioned how it's being called a ceasefire only on one side, which is the Israeli side, and not on the Iranian side. But update coming in is that the IDF says that sirens has been sounded in northern Israel, and missiles have been fired from Iran. So, Mr. Dorsey, what are we really talking about here? What framework of peace are we really even now hoping to stand out?
I obviously haven't seen the last news.
No, sir, this just came in. This is coming in right now during the broadcast.
But I have no doubt about its accuracy, and I think you've got your answer. If the Iranians are firing after there was an agreement or an understanding to halt the firing, then obviously they don't see a halt to these hostilities. We don't know whether that was unprovoked, provoked. I have no idea, so it's very hard to judge. But it is clearly a demonstration of just how fragile whatever agreement there may or may not be, and the fact that it already is being violated.
Professor Khinvraj, come in there. We're talking about, well, the first question we were asking was whether this peace, this fragile peace framework is actually going to stand or not. Within just hours, we seem to be getting not very encouraging response.
Namaskar. It is actually holding well, I must say. I'm in Tel Aviv. As Ankit, your colleague, was showing, those were the sirens that happened here from 4:30 in the morning till about 7 o'clock. In fact, I was sleeping in a shelter room, which looks like a bedroom. It's not like a bunker or a tunnel. And after 7, there has been a complete halt of sirens. What you just read out seems to be the news also in the Israeli media at the moment, that there was a one missile launched in the north. But the statement of the Iranian leaders, as well as the statement of the David Netanyahu in Tel Aviv, have agreed to the peace agreement. Ceasefire agreement. I personally think that this is something that Iran needed as much as America needed. I'll tell you, a day before yesterday, Israeli leaders told Iranians that we will wrap up our operation in few days. And I think it was Trump's ultimatum to Netanyahu to stop it. So I think Trump exercised some amount of leverage over Israel, and Iran really needed a way out. Let's understand this. A few years back, when Soleimani was assassinated, Iranians also carried the ballistic missiles on the American camps with ample amount of information given beforehand. And this is exactly what they did in Qatar. So it gives them a public face. It gives a respectful exit for the regime in Iran. And I think this is what precisely they did yesterday, that they informed Qatar, and Americans were informed. In fact, Israelis were informed.
Indeed, the off-ramp that was offered to the Iranian regime to be able to come out of the present conflict without actually succumbing to the domestic political constituencies there as well. The other question that I want to ask both of you, which is, well, before I come to Donald Trump and his aspiration here, whether it is about peace or whether it's about price, we're going to come to that in a bit. I want to then talk about the nuclear program. The premise of the entire conflict reaching what it was. The whole 12-day war was because the nuclear program continues unabated. James Dorsey, your thoughts on, do you see that now being brought back on the negotiating table?
Again, as I stated earlier, the Iranians want negotiations. The Americans want negotiations. The problem is that in the last 5 rounds, you've had very different concepts of what constitutes a negotiation. If that difference in concept of negotiations, with other words, Trump's tone and his basic attitude which is, I'm telling you what you're going to do, you're going to do it, and if you don't do it, you now know what's going to happen. That's not going to work. I think the further issue here is that you are going to, clearly the Israelis and the Americans have severely damaged the Iranian nuclear program. We don't know how damaged it is. We also don't know how damaged the Iranian ballistic missile arsenal is. But you can bet on it that the Iranians will resume their nuclear program. They will rebuild it, and they will continue to manufacture ballistic missiles.
Okay.
So unless you have a negotiation that really is aimed at coming to a equitable solution,
okay,
you're going to see this halt to hostilities break down.
Okay, so we haven't heard the last of this, but have you heard the last of Trump's prize aspirations? Professor Khinvraj, let me ask you that. Donald Trump and his aspiration for Nobel Peace Prize, many believe that seems to be the one that's driving how he wanted a ceasefire just hours after that attack.
I think his temptation will be really fulfilled if he recognizes the Palestinian state and now calls Israel to end the war in Gaza immediately. which he is capable of doing. The point is, will he really pull the Israel into that change of policy? As far as the nuclear program is concerned, it's a wicked problem in international relations. What Iran is doing is what India did. India went nuclear under American sanctions.
Right.
In fact, if you look at the Indian vocabulary against the NPT, it's exactly the language that Iranians have been using, calling it a nuclear apartheid system. Western world was extremely unfair and remains unfair with their privileges of having the weapons and forbidding the others.
Right.
Personally think what is working for Trump for this ceasefire is the
Yes.
fact that Trump went to this war having the lowest public support for this Iran war.
Indeed.
There was a survey, and less than 20% Americans supported Trump involving in Iranian issue.
Yes.
In fact, some of his billionaire friends and tech friends who are part of the Make America Great Again,
Yes.
they advised him, don't do it. Now, he did the attacks because this was something that was needed. And I do think that Iranian nuclear program was reaching an aggressive messaging as well as explicit threats to the Israeli state. Now that the nuclear program is done, let's
Yes.
think of it. He's not interested in a regime change, even when he said it loosely
Yes.
twice. And Israelis realized it. In fact, there was an interesting report 2 days back in Israel, by the way. IDF released a report for the Israeli Security Cabinet saying that the 10 days of the war has not shaken the regime domestically. What
Right.
Israel anticipated, that there would be a huge public uprising against the
Absolutely.
regime. That didn't happen. So I think Israelis as well as Americans realized they cannot go for a regime change.
They cannot
The
go
whole
for a
world
regime
will turn
change.
against them.
Absolutely.
Trump
All right.
needs to get back to his Make America Great Again project,
All
and
right.
that he do if Middle East goes for a war. But as far as the Nobel Prize is concerned,
No
he
one
will for
knows.
sure get it if he gets the Palestinian issue back on the track.
All right, I'm going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me on this edition of India Global. Well, viewers, the bottom line, as far as this issue is concerned, is that now that the Israel-Iran conflict seems to hopefully be nearing its end, questions do remain as far as the truce pact is concerned. How was it ratified? US has had pushed for a ceasefire owing to Trump's campaign promise of not entering a conflict. He needs to keep his MAGA constituency happy. Twice he's campaigned for not entering a Middle East war. He could not have possibly entered one himself, which is why a ceasefire was important. Second was his aspiration for a Nobel Peace Prize. He was nominated by the Pakistanis, but the Pakistanis themselves now are debating whether Trump was worth it or not. So he needed someone else to nominate him for, and that was this war. It had to come to an end, and which is why this could be another reason why Donald Trump announced a ceasefire so early. Is that going to be the situation on ground? Will the peace actually hold out, or will conditions once again lead to some sort of a contest or a conflict from here on? No one knows.